What happens when a man uses the legal system to take everything in a divorce, leaving the woman who once stood beside him with nothing but 2 suitcases and a single address, her late grandfather's forgotten cabin? People often say, what's done in the dark will always come to light. When the truth begins to surface from the one place everyone believed was worthless, should she walk away from the past, or face it to reclaim her worth? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now, I'd like you to hear what she's been carrying in her heart. The courtroom in Seattle felt colder than the rain-soaked streets outside. I sat at the polished wooden table, hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to steady the tremor that threatened to betray my composure. Across from me, Nathaniel Nate Cross looked immaculate in his tailored suit, the picture of confidence and control. Beside him sat his high-priced attorney, a man whose voice carried the smooth certainty of someone accustomed to winning. My own lawyer, though well-meaning, shuffled through his papers with visible uncertainty, already conceding ground before the battle had truly begun. As the proceedings unfolded, Nate's attorney painted a carefully constructed narrative. Nate as the primary provider, the architect of our financial stability, the driving force behind every success we had achieved as a couple. I listened in silence, each word slicing through years of memories. No one mentioned the nights I worked double shifts to keep us afloat, while Nate struggled to launch his career, or the savings I had quietly funneled into his first business venture. Those sacrifices seemed to vanish under the weight of legal rhetoric and polished arguments. The judge's expression remained neutral as the final ruling was delivered. Nate was awarded everything. The house we had renovated together, the car I had helped pay off, our joint savings, and even the retirement accounts we had once discussed with hopeful anticipation. I was left with a modest settlement, barely enough to sustain me for a few months. The only asset deemed solely mine was my grandfather's cabin near Lake Crescent, dismissed in court as having little to no economic value. When I lifted my gaze, my eyes met a sight that confirmed what my heart had suspected long before this day. Sitting a few rows behind Nate was Vanessa Whitmore. She offered him a subtle, reassuring smile, her hand briefly brushing his shoulder as if the courtroom were merely a formality. Their intimacy was unmistakable. In that moment, the truth settled heavily within me. Our marriage had not simply unraveled due to irreconcilable differences. It had been carefully dismantled, likely for reasons far beyond emotion, reasons tied to ambition and opportunity. Walking out of the courthouse with 2 suitcases, I felt the weight of finality press down on me. The life I had built over the years had been reduced to a pair of rolling bags and a legal document declaring the end of my marriage. The sky above Seattle mirrored my state of mind, gray and unrelenting. With nowhere else to go, I accepted Olivia Hart's offer to stay at her small apartment. Olivia had always been the kind of friend who showed up without being asked, her warmth providing a fragile sense of stability amid the chaos. Yet, as days passed, I became increasingly aware of the disruption my presence caused in her already cramped space. Despite her reassurances, I felt like an uninvited guest, lingering beyond her hospitality. One evening, as I sifted through the few belongings I had salvaged, my fingers brushed against an old envelope bearing a familiar address, Vale Family Cabin, Lake Crescent. Memories of my grandfather, Ezekiel Vale, flooded my mind. Summer afternoons spent fishing by the lake, the comforting scent of pine wood, and the gentle wisdom in his voice. The cabin was the only place left that still held a connection to who I once was before my life became entangled with Nate's ambitions. With a mixture of hesitation and quiet resolve, I decided to leave Seattle. The drive to Lake Crescent was long and solitary, the rhythmic hum of the engine accompanying a cascade of memories. Each mile seemed to carry me further away from the ruins of my past and closer to a chapter I had never imagined revisiting. When I finally arrived, the cabin stood nestled among towering evergreens, its weathered exterior a testament to the passage of time. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of the forest and the distant whisper of the lake. The front door was secured with a rusted lock, forcing me to break it open to gain entry. As the door creaked inward, a cloud of dust greeted me, swirling in the dim light that filtered through the windows. Inside, the cabin remained frozen in time. Furniture was draped in dusty sheets, and the faint scent of aged wood lingered in the air. Yet beneath the neglect, I could still sense my grandfather's presence in every corner. The worn armchair by the fireplace, the neatly stacked books on the shelves, and the paintings he had lovingly created. Exhausted, I sank to the floor of the living room, surrounded by silence. In that moment, the magnitude of my loss became undeniable. My marriage was over, my sense of security shattered, and my future uncertain. Yet, as I sat there in the quiet embrace of the cabin, a fragile realization emerged. Although everything else had been taken from me, this place remained, a solitary thread connecting me to hope. The journey ahead was unclear, but it had begun. The first morning at the cabin arrived with a soft glow of sunlight filtering through the dusty windows. Determined to reclaim some sense of control over my life, I began the arduous task of cleaning. Each movement, sweeping the floors, wiping down surfaces, and airing out the musty rooms, felt like an act of quiet defiance against the despair that threatened to consume me. As layers of dust disappeared, fragments of my childhood resurfaced, carried by the familiar objects my grandfather had left behind. In the kitchen, I found an assortment of well-worn utensils and a collection of handwritten recipes in my grandfather's careful script. In the bedroom, an old quilt stirred memories of nights spent listening to his stories. These tangible remnants of the past offered a bittersweet comfort, reminding me of a time when life felt simpler and love was unwavering. Despite the physical labor, the emotional weight of my circumstances remained ever present. The solitude of the cabin forced me to confront the pain I had been avoiding. Seeking some semblance of connection, I called my mother, hoping for reassurance. Instead, our brief conversation was marked by indifference. She offered polite but distant words, suggesting that I move on and focus on rebuilding my life. The lack of genuine concern underscored a painful truth. The bond I had shared with my grandfather was far deeper than any support I could expect from the rest of my family. A few days later, while exploring the area around the lake, I encountered Maggie Doyle, a longtime neighbor and close friend of my grandfather. Maggie welcomed me with a warmth that immediately eased my lingering sense of isolation. Over cups of tea in her cozy home, she shared stories of Ezekiel's later years, emphasizing how often he spoke of me with pride and affection. During our conversation, Maggie revealed something that stirred both curiosity and unease. She mentioned that Nate had visited the area several years earlier, asking detailed questions about the land surrounding Lake Crescent and its ownership. The revelation sent a chill down my spine, suggesting that his interest in the cabin, and perhaps even in our marriage, might have been driven by motives far more calculated than I had ever imagined. Maggie also hinted that my grandfather had anticipated the need to protect something important. She recalled him speaking cryptically about waiting for the right time, though he had never elaborated on what he meant. Intrigued by, I began to pay closer attention to the cabin's interior upon returning home. Subtle irregularities soon caught my eye. Several of my grandfather's paintings were mounted unusually securely on the walls, as if concealing more than mere artistic expression. In an old drawer, I discovered neatly organized documents whose significance was not immediately clear, but suggested careful planning. These details, though seemingly minor, contributed to a growing sense that the cabin held secrets yet to be uncovered. As the days passed, my routine of cleaning and reflection gradually transformed the cabin into a livable space. However, emotional turbulence within me persisted. Each evening, I found myself sitting by the fireplace, grappling with the betrayal that had upended my life, while simultaneously feeling an inexplicable sense of anticipation. On the seventh night, fatigue guided my movements as I continued tidying the living room. While dusting one of my grandfather's largest paintings, I accidentally nudged it, causing it to shift slightly on the wall. The unexpected movement revealed that it had been hanging with unusual firmness. My heart began to race as a surge of intuition took hold. Standing there in the quiet stillness of the cabin, I sensed that this discovery marked the threshold of a profound revelation, one that would not only illuminate my grandfather's intentions, but also alter the course of my future. The week that had begun in sorrow was about to lead me toward a truth hidden patiently behind the canvas, waiting for the moment it would finally be found. On the seventh night at the cabin, the silence felt heavier than usual. The only sounds were the soft crackling of the fireplace and the distant whisper of wind moving through the pine trees outside. I had spent the entire day cleaning, determined to restore the space to something resembling a home. As I dusted the living room, my attention returned to one of my grandfather's largest paintings, a serene landscape of Lake Crescent at sunrise. Something about it had been bothering me. It hung more securely than the others, fastened with an unusual firmness that seemed intentional. Curiosity compelled me to take it down. As I carefully lifted the frame from the wall, I noticed a sealed envelope taped to the back. My heart began to pound as I peeled it free. The paper was aged but well preserved, and on the front, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, it's because I'm already gone." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside, I found 3 items: a handwritten letter, a small brass key, and a business card bearing the name *Benjamin Carter, attorney at law, along with an address in Port Angeles. I unfolded the letter, and as I began to read, it felt as though my grandfather's voice was speaking directly to me. He wrote of his enduring love and pride, recalling the summers we spent together and the kindness he had always admired in me. He acknowledged the sacrifices I had made throughout my life, particularly the way I had given so much of myself to others without receiving the appreciation I deserved. His words carried a gentle sorrow, as if he had foreseen the hardships I would one day face. He explained that he had prepared a legacy intended to protect me during my most vulnerable moments. He urged me to contact Benjamin Carter and, importantly, to keep this discovery confidential from the rest of the family until the appropriate time. By the time I finished reading, tears streamed down my face. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a sense of warmth and reassurance. My grandfather had not only believed in me, but had also taken steps to ensure my future. Clutching the key and the business card, I sensed that my journey was only beginning. The following morning, I drove to Port Angeles, the early sunlight reflecting off the tranquil waters of Lake Crescent as I made my way along the winding road. Evergreen Communities Bank stood at the corner of a quiet street, its modest exterior belying the significance it now held for me. Inside, I was greeted by Benjamin Carter, a composed man in his late 50s whose calm demeanor immediately instilled confidence. "I've been expecting you, Ms. Vale," he said gently, extending his hand. His words confirmed that my grandfather's plans had been meticulously arranged. After verifying my identity, Benjamin escorted me to a private room where the bank's safety deposit boxes were kept. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key into the lock. When the box slid open, I discovered a collection of carefully organized documents. Among them were legal papers establishing the *Vale Land Trust, multiple deeds granting ownership of extensive parcels of land surrounding Lake Crescent, and a detailed journal chronicling grandfather's acquisitions over several decades. As Benjamin explained the contents, the magnitude of what lay before me began to sink in. My grandfather had quietly purchased hundreds of acres of strategically located land around the lake. The properties formed a continuous stretch that controlled key access points to the area. Even more astonishing was the legal structure of the trust. The assets were entirely separate from any marital property, meaning they were shielded from the divorce proceedings that had left me with virtually nothing. I leafed through the journal, tracing the careful notes and reflections written in my grandfather's steady hand. Each entry revealed not only his strategic foresight, but also his unwavering intention to safeguard my future. What had once seemed like a modest and forgotten inheritance was, in reality, the foundation of a vast and invaluable estate. As we concluded the meeting, Benjamin looked at me with a reassuring smile. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man, Serafina. He wanted to make sure you would never be left without protection." Driving back to the cabin, the world around me appeared transformed. The despair that had consumed me only days earlier began to give way to a fragile but growing sense of hope. The cabin was no longer merely a refuge from my past. It was the gateway to a future my grandfather had carefully prepared. For the first time since leaving the courthouse, I felt that my life was no longer defined by loss but by possibility. A few days after my visit to the bank, I returned to Benjamin Carter's office to gain a deeper understanding of the legacy my grandfather had entrusted to me. The office, located in the heart of Port Angeles, was lined with shelves of legal volumes and framed certificates that spoke to decades of experience. Benjamin welcomed me with the same calm professionalism, sensing the mixture of anticipation and uncertainty I carried. He began by outlining the structure of the *Vale Land Trust. Established many years before my grandfather's passing, the trust designated me as its sole beneficiary. Benjamin explained that this legal arrangement ensured the complete separation of the trust's assets from any marital property. As a result, the estate was entirely protected from claims arising from my divorce. Hearing this confirmation felt like a profound vindication, as though justice had quietly prevailed where the courtroom had failed me. Benjamin then presented a series of detailed maps and valuation reports. As he spread them across his desk, I realized the true extent of my grandfather's foresight. The trust encompassed not just isolated parcels of land, but a strategic network of properties surrounding Lake Crescent. The eastern shoreline, the northern hillside, and the primary access routes to the lake were all under my ownership. These areas were essential for any future development in the region, granting me a level of influence I had never imagined. Eager to grasp the reality of this inheritance, I spent the following days exploring the land myself. Walking along the tranquil shores and through the dense forests, I began to see the landscape through new eyes. not merely as a place of childhood memories, but as a legacy entrusted to my care. The initial shock gradually evolved into a profound sense of responsibility. My grandfather had not simply left me wealth. He had entrusted me with a vision. During one of our subsequent meetings, Benjamin revealed information that introduced a new layer of complexity. He explained that Silvercrest Development Group had repeatedly attempted to acquire these lands in the past. Their plans for a large-scale luxury resort depended heavily on securing the very parcels now under my control. Without them, the project could not proceed. The situation became even more unsettling when Benjamin mentioned a connection between my former husband and the development company. Through his professional network, he had discovered that Nathaniel Cross maintained a business relationship with Daniel Whitmore, a key representative of Silvercrest. The revelation sent a chill through me, casting my divorce in an entirely new light. It suggested that Nate's actions might have been motivated not only by personal betrayal, but also by calculated financial ambition. That evening, back at the cabin, I revisited my grandfather's journal. As I carefully turned its pages, one particular entry caught my attention. In it, my grandfather alluded to concerns about individuals who might attempt to exploit the land for their own gain. He expressed confidence that the legal safeguards he had established would protect the estate and ensure that it remained in trustworthy hands. Although he never mentioned Nate by name, the implication was unmistakable. He had anticipated the possibility of betrayal long before it occurred. Standing on the porch of the cabin, overlooking the still waters of Lake Crescent, I felt the weight of this realization settle upon me. I was no longer merely a woman recovering from the ruins of a failed marriage. I had become the guardian of a significant legacy, and perhaps the central figure in a broader economic conflict. Recognizing the potential consequences, I made a deliberate decision to keep the true value of the land confidential. The knowledge I now possessed was both a gift and a responsibility, and I understood that careful planning would be essential in navigating the challenges ahead. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden reflections across the lake, a quiet determination took root within me. For the first time, I was not simply reacting to the events of my life. I was preparing to shape them. The journey that had begun with loss and despair was evolving into one of empowerment and purpose, guided by the enduring wisdom and foresight of my grandfather. The stage was set for the confrontations that would inevitably follow, and I was finally ready to face them. Life at the Vale family cabin had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm. Each morning, the mist rose gently from Lake Crescent, wrapping the surrounding forest in a soft veil that felt both protective and timeless. What once seemed like an escape had gradually transformed into a place of clarity and purpose. I spent my days reviewing the documents from the Vale Land Trust, walking the boundaries of the property, and reflecting on the responsibility my grandfather had entrusted to me. Yet beneath this newfound sense of stability lingered an awareness that the past was not finished with me. That awareness materialized one crisp afternoon when the sound of tires crunching along the gravel driveway shattered the stillness. I stepped onto the porch and felt my breath catch as a familiar figure emerged from a sleek black SUV. Nathaniel Cross stood before me, dressed impeccably as always, his expression carefully arranged into what appeared to be concern. "Serafina," he said softly, as though we were old friends rather than estranged spouses. "I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay." His sudden appearance felt intrusive, almost calculated. I maintained my composure, inviting him inside only out of a desire to understand his true intentions. As we sat across from each other in the living room, the weight of unspoken history filled the space. Nathaniel spoke of regret and nostalgia, attempting to evoke memories of the life we once shared. However, his carefully chosen words could not conceal the tension in his posture or the subtle urgency in his tone. It did not take long for his true purpose to surface. Nathaniel explained that he was now working closely with Silvercrest Development Group, a company interested in transforming the area around Lake Crescent into a luxury resort destination. He proposed that we collaborate by selling the land held within the Vale Land Trust, assuring me that the financial rewards would be substantial. According to him, such a sale would allow me to rebuild my life with ease. As he spoke, I observed the flicker of anxiety behind his confident demeanor. The offer was framed as an opportunity, yet it felt more like a desperate attempt to secure something he believed was slipping beyond his reach. I responded cautiously, expressing appreciation for the proposal while making it clear that I needed time to consider my options. Nathaniel's polite smile faltered for a brief moment before he regained his composure and departed, leaving behind an unsettling sense that his visit was only the beginning. Seeking further clarity, I visited Margaret Maggie Doyle later that evening. Maggie welcomed me warmly into her home, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea filling the air. As we spoke, I recounted Nathaniel's unexpected visit and his interest in the land. Maggie's expression grew thoughtful, and after a moment of hesitation, she revealed something that deepened my understanding of the situation. Several years earlier, Nathaniel had traveled to Lake Crescent under the pretense of accompanying me on a brief visit. During that time, he had independently approached Maggie and other local residents, inquiring about property ownership and the potential for commercial development in the area. His questions had been unusually detailed, focusing on access routes and zoning possibilities. Concerned by his behavior, Maggie had mentioned the encounter to my grandfather. Shortly thereafter, Ezekiel had taken decisive steps to finalize the legal structure of the Vale Land Trust, ensuring that the land would remain protected. This revelation cast Nathaniel's actions in a new and troubling light. What I had once perceived as the gradual deterioration of our marriage now appeared to be intertwined with a calculated interest in my family's legacy. The realization was both painful and clarifying, strengthening my resolve to safeguard what my grandfather had entrusted to me. Not long after, I agreed to attend a formal meeting at the offices of Silvercrest Development Group in Port Angeles. I felt it was essential to understand the full scope of their intentions. The company's headquarters exuded sophistication, with expansive glass walls and meticulously designed interiors that reflected their corporate ambition. I was greeted by Daniel Whitmore, a polished executive whose confidence suggested long experience in high-stakes negotiations. Daniel presented a comprehensive proposal outlining Silvercrest's vision for a luxury resort that would capitalize on the natural beauty of Lake Crescent. He emphasized the economic benefits for the region and concluded with an offer to purchase all the land within the Vale Land Trust at a price far exceeding typical market valuations. The figures were undeniably impressive, yet the proposal felt devoid of any appreciation for the emotional and historical significance of the land. As the meeting progressed, another presence entered the room, Vanessa Whitmore. The moment our eyes met, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Vanessa was not only Nathaniel's companion, but also Daniel's sister, creating an unmistakable link between my former marriage and Silvercrest's ambitions. The implications were impossible to ignore. During the conversation, Nathaniel subtly acknowledged that he had long recognized the potential of the land surrounding Lake Crescent. His remarks suggested that our marriage had provided him with proximity to an opportunity he intended to exploit. Furthermore, his aggressive pursuit of the divorce settlement now appeared to have been a deliberate strategy to leave me financially vulnerable, increasing the likelihood that I would be compelled to sell the land under pressure. Despite the magnitude of their offer, I remained resolute. When Daniel concluded his presentation, I calmly declined the proposal, explaining that the land represented more than a financial asset. It was a legacy I intended to preserve. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Nathaniel's frustration became evident, while Daniel attempted to maintain a veneer of professionalism. Leaving the Silvercrest office, I felt an unexpected sense of empowerment. For the first time, I was no longer reacting to circumstances dictated by others. Instead, I was asserting my own agency and protecting the vision my grandfather had carefully established. The conflict had evolved beyond personal betrayal into a broader struggle over values, heritage, and control. I understood that this decision would likely provoke further challenges, but I was prepared to face them. The consequences of my refusal became apparent sooner than anticipated. Only a few days after the meeting with Silvercrest, I received an official legal notice informing me that Nathaniel had filed a motion to reopen our divorce case. He alleged that I had failed to disclose significant assets related to the Vale Land Trust during the original proceedings. The accusation was both shocking and deeply unsettling, threatening to entangle the estate in prolonged legal uncertainty. I immediately contacted Benjamin Carter, who reassured me with his characteristic calm. At his office in Port Angeles, he explained that while Nathaniel's claim lacked merit, the legal process could potentially delay any decisions concerning the land. Such a delay would undoubtedly serve Silvercrest's interests by applying pressure on me to reconsider their offer. Determined to confront the challenge, Benjamin and I began a meticulous review of my grandfather's journal and legal records. During this process, we discovered a reference to what Ezekiel had termed Protocol B. Intrigued. Benjamin initiated a search for the associated documentation. The resulting file revealed a comprehensive legal strategy designed to safeguard the trust against precisely the type of challenge Nathaniel had initiated. The documents included independent legal opinions from multiple attorneys affirming the trust's legitimacy, as well as a formal declaration stating that I had no prior knowledge of its existence during the divorce proceedings. Additionally, my grandfather had written a detailed letter explaining his decision to maintain strict confidentiality, emphasizing his desire to protect the estate from potential exploitation. Armed with this evidence, Benjamin prepared a compelling legal response. The case proceeded to the local courthouse in Washington, where the clarity and thoroughness of the documentation left little room for dispute. The judge ultimately determined that the Vale Land Trust had been lawfully established and that I had not withheld any information during the divorce. Faced with the strength of this evidence, Nathaniel was compelled to withdraw his claim. During the period of uncertainty leading up to the court's decision, I found solace in an activity that reconnected me with my grandfather's spirit. Inspired by the paintings that adorned the cabin, I began to create my own depiction of Lake Crescent. Each brushstroke became a meditative act, allowing me to process the emotional turmoil of the past months while embracing a renewed sense of purpose. Through this creative process, I felt a profound connection to the legacy my grandfather had left behind, not merely in terms of land and wealth, but in the values of resilience and stewardship. As the legal victory became official, additional developments further shifted the balance of power. News reached us that Silvercrest Development Group was experiencing mounting financial pressure due to delays in their resort project. Without access to the land under my control, their plans remained stalled, increasing their dependence on my eventual cooperation. Moreover, Nathaniel's involvement in the failed legal challenge led to significant professional repercussions, resulting in the loss of his position within the company. Standing once again on the porch of the cabin, I gazed out over the tranquil expanse of Lake Crescent. The journey from despair to empowerment had been both arduous and transformative. I was no longer defined by the losses I had endured, but by the strength I had discovered within myself. The legacy entrusted to me represented not only financial security, but also a responsibility to honor my grandfather's vision. With full legal authority over the land now firmly established, I began to contemplate its future. Rather than viewing it solely as a source of economic opportunity, I recognized its potential to serve as a lasting tribute to the values of preservation and community that my grandfather had cherished. The challenges I had faced had forged a deeper understanding of my own resilience, preparing me for the decisions that lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden reflections across the lake, I felt a sense of peace that had long eluded me. The battles fought thus far had not only secured my inheritance, but had also restored my faith in my ability to shape my own destiny. The stage was now set for the final chapter of this journey, one defined not by loss, but by renewal and purpose. Several weeks had passed since Nathaniel withdrew his legal challenge, and with each day, the reality of my new life settled more firmly into place. The Vale family cabin was no longer just a refuge from the wreckage of my past. It had become a symbol of renewal and responsibility. Standing on the porch each morning, watching the sunlight stretch across the still waters of Lake Crescent, I felt a quiet strength growing within me. The woman who had once walked out of a courthouse with 2 suitcases had transformed into someone capable of shaping her own destiny. Yet with that transformation came an important decision. The land entrusted to me represented not only immense financial value, but also the vision and legacy of my grandfather, Ezekiel Vale. I found myself wrestling with 2 possibilities: selling the property to secure an easy and comfortable future, or preserving it to honor the purpose he had carefully safeguarded for decades. The answer was not immediately clear, but deep within, I sensed that the choice would define the course of my life. To prepare for the next step, I met with Benjamin Carter at his office in Port Angeles. Together, we reviewed extensive documentation on Silvercrest Development Group. The company's proposed luxury resort promised significant economic returns, but it also revealed a crucial vulnerability. Every phase of the project depended on access to the parcels of land held within the Vale Land Trust. Without my cooperation, their plans could not proceed. This realization placed me in a position of undeniable leverage. Benjamin and I discussed potential strategies for the upcoming negotiation. Rather than viewing the situation as a simple transaction, we approached it as an opportunity to establish terms that would protect both the environment and my grandfather's legacy. For the first time, I felt not only prepared but confident, aware that the balance of power had shifted decisively in my favor. The formal meeting with Silvercrest was scheduled at Benjamin's office. When I arrived, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Daniel Whitmore, the company's representative, greeted me with practiced professionalism. Accompanying him was Richard Hale, Silvercrest's Director of Investments, whose analytical gaze suggested a man accustomed to evaluating risks and opportunities. Benjamin sat beside me, his calm presence reinforcing my resolve. As the meeting began, Daniel presented an enhanced offer to purchase the entirety of the land within the trust. The figures were staggering, far exceeding previous proposals. He emphasized the potential economic benefits for the region and the prestige associated with the development. For a moment, I allowed myself to consider what such wealth could mean. Freedom from financial concerns and the opportunity to start anew. However, the emotional significance of the land and my grandfather's intentions remained far more compelling. Midway through the discussion, the door opened, and Nathaniel Cross entered the room. His presence was unexpected yet revealing. Introduced as a senior executive involved in the project, he carried himself with a confidence that suggested long-standing involvement with Silvercrest. The implication was unmistakable. His connection to the company had been carefully cultivated over many years. Maintaining my composure, I listened as the proposal concluded. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly expressed my appreciation for the offer before delivering my decision. I explained that the land was not for sale under any circumstances. Instead, I presented an alternative, a 60-year lease agreement that would allow Silvercrest to develop the resort while ensuring that ownership and long-term stewardship remained with the Vale family. The terms were comprehensive. They included substantial annual payments, a percentage of the resort's ongoing revenue, and strict environmental protections designed to preserve the natural integrity of Lake Crescent. Additionally, I retained significant oversight to ensure that any development aligned with my grandfather's vision. The room fell silent as the implications of my proposal became clear. Nathaniel attempted to challenge my position, subtly questioning my understanding of the complexities involved. In response, I addressed his prior legal actions, openly acknowledging his attempt to gain control of the trust through the courts. The disclosure shifted the dynamic of the meeting. Daniel and Richard exchanged concerned glances, recognizing the potential conflict of interest and the reputational risk associated with Nathaniel's involvement. After a brief private discussion, Silvercrest's leadership requested that Nathaniel step out of the meeting to allow negotiations to proceed without further complications. The moment marked a decisive turning point, underscoring the erosion of his influence within the company. With renewed focus, the conversation resumed, and Daniel acknowledged that my proposal, though unexpected, offered a viable path forward for their project. By the conclusion of the meeting, Silvercrest agreed to seriously consider the lease arrangement. As I left Benjamin's office, a profound sense of empowerment settled over me. I had not only protected my grandfather's legacy, but had also asserted my independence and authority. The journey from vulnerability to strength was complete, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. 2 weeks after the negotiation, the final decision from Silvercrest arrived. I returned to Benjamin Carter's office, where the atmosphere was one of quiet anticipation. Spread across the conference table were the finalized documents detailing the lease agreement. After thorough review and minor adjustments, Silvercrest had accepted all the essential terms. The agreement established a 60-year lease with provisions for reassessment every 10 years. It guaranteed substantial annual income and included a percentage of the resort's revenue, ensuring long-term financial stability. Equally important were the environmental safeguards and oversight mechanisms that would preserve the natural beauty of the land. As I signed my name on the final page, I felt a profound sense of closure. This moment represented not merely a financial milestone, but the culmination of a deeply personal journey. Shortly thereafter, Benjamin informed me of further developments regarding Nathaniel. Due to the conflict of interest surrounding his involvement in the failed legal challenge and the ensuing negotiations, Silvercrest had terminated his position within the company. In the days that followed, Nathaniel attempted to contact me several times, seeking an opportunity for reconciliation. Each message was filled with a mixture of regret and desperation. After careful reflection, I chose not to respond. Some chapters of life are meant to remain closed, allowing space for healing and growth. Returning to the cabin, I embraced the tranquility that had become my sanctuary. Autumn had begun to transform the landscape, painting the surrounding forest in hues of gold and crimson. The changing season mirrored my own transformation, symbolizing renewal and the promise of new beginnings. While organizing my grandfather's belongings, I discovered a final note tucked within his journal. In it, he expressed his hope that I would become not only the beneficiary of his estate, but also the guardian of the land's enduring legacy. His words emphasized the importance of preserving the natural environment and fostering a sense of community. The message resonated deeply, reaffirming my commitment to honor his vision. Inspired by this realization, I began to develop plans for initiatives that would benefit the local community and protect the ecological integrity of the area. Educational programs, conservation efforts, and public access to certain parts of the land became central elements of my vision. The estate would serve not only as a source of financial security, but also as a testament to the values my grandfather had cherished. One afternoon, I set up an easel on the porch overlooking Lake Crescent and began painting the serene landscape before me. The act of creation felt profoundly symbolic, connecting me to the artistic spirit of my grandfather. When the painting was complete, I hung it beside his own works within the cabin. Signing my name beneath the canvas was more than a simple gesture. It was an affirmation of my identity and the resilience that had carried me through adversity. As I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment, I recognized how far I had come. I was no longer the woman who had left a marriage with nothing but sorrow and uncertainty. Instead, I had emerged as the steward of a legacy, empowered by the love and foresight of my grandfather. The challenges I faced had revealed strengths I never knew I possessed, guiding me toward a future defined by purpose and self-belief. Standing once more on the porch as the sun set over Lake Crescent, I felt an enduring sense of peace. The trials of the past had given way to a renewed understanding of what truly mattered: resilience, family, and faith in oneself. My grandfather's greatest gift was not merely the land or the wealth it represented, but the confidence he had instilled in me to shape my own destiny. With gratitude in my heart and hope for the future, I stepped forward into the next chapter of my life, ready to honor the legacy entrusted to me and to build a life defined not by loss but by strength, purpose, and enduring love.